So we say create a culture where people invite feedback. But like, let's be honest. Bryce says after, oh, hey, blah, blah, can I give you some feedback? The story you told was a little bit long. It's like, I'll smile and say, oh, yeah, oh, thanks for that, Bryce. But the real deep down, I'm like, screw you, dude. Like, what do you know?
I was just listening to an interview between Tim Ferriss and Tony Fadell, one of the great visionaries of Silicon Valley, worked with Steve Jobs, on the iPhone and all this stuff. And Fadell was saying, you have to know what type of asshole to be.
Yeah.
And he unpacked
Good point.
it, and he said, if you're abusive, if you're putting people down, if you're belittling people, that's a bad asshole. But he said, if you care passionately about the product and you're going to push people to get it right because that's what the customers need, and to execute the vision that you've all agreed to as a team and hold people accountable, you may have to act like an asshole sometimes to do that. But it's a different thing from just beating people about the face and head. Yeah.
If I were to lay into that, I would say I was a process asshole, and I tried to, which allowed me to release being an outcome asshole. I think too many times we do it both ways, where we have randomized outcomes. I just say, imagine that your job, you're buying a lottery ticket, and then you win the lottery. Say, oh, great job, you won the lottery, good decision. And then you didn't win the lottery. Oh, bad decision. Like, well, it's a randomized outcome. Yeah. So for me, and your ego is part of this too, because your ego attaches to likes to attach to outcomes. So then I say, and back in 2005, I sold my house, and then it was the house. Oh, how smart am I? But it was just a randomized. You were just moving from San Francisco to Vegas, and blah blah blah. And then you try and replicate that and it doesn't happen. And now you're all confused. Well, it was just a random outcome. So, but the process, we don't have control over the outcome. We have control over the process. And also, by the way, trying to hold people accountable for outcomes is the best sports teams try to be agnostic about whether you won or lost. They say, look, let's just, like if you look at John Wooden stuff or Trevor Mawad, the coach psychologist stuff, sports coach, and it's about, look, let's just do what we have control over. It's about aligning your focus on what you can control and release the rest.
And I think accountability comes into it. You have to have accountability on your team.
For the process, for the things you can control.
For the process, exactly. Not for the outcome, for the process.
Right. Yes. Well, people say, well, how'd you hold people accountable? Which is weird because I never really felt I had to. The reason we have that word is because we say things like this, Bryce. Okay, Bryce, you're going to deliver a 50,000 word manuscript in 6 months. You have this much thing. You have this many people on your team. You got this many resources. You can have this much quality. And then I'm going to hold you accountable when you came short. Well, it's like, that seems unfair. I really didn't have control over any of the input variables. Like,
then COVID happened.
Yeah. And then COVID happened. I couldn't no one wanted to get interviewed. So, but if you say, well, what did you do? Well, I just felt sorry about myself for 6 months and didn't do anything to get out of bed. Well, okay. Well, then maybe that's something we can talk about. But we would always try and hold people accountable for the process. I was talking to my son the other day. He's a lawyer in DC, works for a nonprofit. And he's like, Dad, you ever make any goals for yourself? I said, no, never a one, which is what sort of totally true. But I kind of wanted to push it a little bit. He's like, what, really? It's like, yeah, I would just say, okay, if I want to do this. So let's say you want to retire with $1 million. You can't control that, but I can control, I'm going to save 10% of my paycheck, and it's going to automatically go, even before I see it, into an account that it's very hard for me to get the money out of. And it's going to invest in a broad market index. And I'm just going to do its thing. And then if the stock market crashes, well, you can't control it, but don't feel bad about the outcome because the process was correct.
Yes. I love it. This is such great stuff, David. So many great pieces of advice for leaders in all of this. It's like a masterclass in leadership here. It really is.
It is.
Thank you for tuning in to The Thinking Leader. Check the show notes for more information about the topics covered in this episode there. You'll also find a link to our free assessment. Click on it right now to find out if you are a red team thinker with a red team culture.